Okay, welcome back to Culture Your Creative. Very, very pleased to have a guest today, Bryan. Hi, Bryan. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, Bryan, thanks for your time, because when I spoke to you, we had a good conversation a few weeks ago. You are probably one of the busiest persons I know, and I'm super intrigued and interested to dive deep into what it is that you do, about your brand and everything else. So do you want to start off, say who you are and a brief overview of what you currently do?
Yeah, totally. I'm Bryan Papé. I'm the founder and CEO of a brand called MiiR, MiiR, founded in Seattle, Washington. Just celebrated 10 years of existence this summer, and we sell sustainable drinkware with a social and environmental mission. So you actually see the mission statement a bit behind me, but in our lab here, and where we do all the fun product testing and whatnot. But essentially, we exist to empower people for a better future. And one of our vision, what we really want to see in the future of mankind, humankind, is that we really want to create more beauty and generosity in the world, and that's everything that kind of comes out of MiiR is seen through those two things and that lens. So I'm in Seattle, Washington. I'm married to an incredible woman. We've been married for 13 years, which is part of the founder story. And she's a co-founder. She's kind of played a more silent role in the beginning of MiiR, and lately has been joining. She's worked here for now 6 years on payroll, I believe. So anyway, we have a fantastic time. We host a podcast together. We work day in and day out. Obviously, when I'm at home, we're both at home. We have two kids running around, so it's pure chaos, but we love it.
I love it, mate. I love it. No, so what I'm intrigued to know is you just read out that statement that's behind you, exists to empower people for a better future. Like, how did that start in your mind at the beginning, and has that changed through the 10 years that you've been in business?
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think, we crisped up that mission statement, gosh, maybe 3-4 years ago. We had some different iterations that were similar, but really at the core of the idea of MiiR was how do we use business to basically improve the world? And the idea was, how do we merge business and philanthropy? And something that I had kind of been noodling on for a while was, the traditional model of business was you build a great business, you amass wealth, and then you give money away at the end of your life, through a foundation or whatever. And I'd seen that personally, where my grandfather had started a family business after World War II. It was quite successful. And then unfortunately, from some health complications, he passed away in 1996. And in 97, my grandmother started a foundation kind of in his honor, from the beautiful legacy that he had lived. And so, while my grandfather was generous during his lifetime, he missed out on some of that later in life generosity. And so I've always kind of thought about, what if every transaction, every product you sell or service that you sell, some sort of portion is given from that. And so you get to live in your generosity day in and day out. So really that was kind of the idea. And it kind of came to a head in 2006. I had a small media production company. I was filming at a local ski hill, ended up taking a wrong turn while filming, broke my femur right in half. And when you break your femur, you can, it's the biggest bone in your body, and you can essentially hit your femoral rod, and you can bleed to death internally in about 10-15 minutes. And so unfortunately, I knew this because my roommate at the time had done something like that 2 years earlier. He fortunately lived, but he came back from the hospital and said, hey, never break your femur because you can hit this artery, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, here I am in 2006, lying against this tree with my leg kind of off to the right, completely snapped in half, thinking, oh, this might be the last 10 minutes of my life. And it was a very surreal experience. It was very still and quiet. And I had two crisp thoughts that came to mind. The first was, a bit of context of who I was in 2006. It was very self-focused. How could I make money for myself, advance my own ideas, my own purpose, kind of my own ego, to the standpoint of, like, I'd been dating my now wife, Rebecca. We've been dating for 3 years, to the extent that, like, it took me breaking my leg to be like, I should probably marry her. She's incredible, right? We ended up getting married a year later. And as I said, we have 2 kids now, which is really fun. And the second thing, again, very selfish, I thought about, what would people say about me at my funeral? What would people say about my legacy, thinking about my grandfather's legacy that he had created? And I realized that nobody would have gotten up at my funeral and said anything super positive about me helping in my community or giving, so to speak. And that really struck me, because that's not, I think, in a moment of self-reflection, that's not who I wanted to be. And so I kind of had this moment of propulsion of looking at life differently. And then, fast forward 3 years later, this idea of merging business and philanthropy came to fruition through what is now MiiR.
So do you think, I love everything you just said, Bryan. And it's really interesting that something happened to change the trajectory of your life and change that mindset. And I'm really interested to know more about your grandfather as well, with what he had built. Do you think that was he ever a mentor to you? Do you think that he was always in the background of your mind of what he'd done, and kind of that combined with the accident that you had to sort of turn that light bulb on?
I think a bit. I was fairly young around my grandfather. I'm trying to think when he had passed. I was, gosh, let me do the math here, like 12, I want to say. So I was fairly young. So in a standpoint, it was a lot of fun and games with my grandfather. Swimming with him. He taught me how to swim, and a lot of great experiences with him. He was such a great grandfather, not in the like hierarchy standpoint, but just so fun to be around. Cared so much about his grandkids. I mean, he lived for his grandkids, and it was a really great experience to be with him. And so not necessarily from a business mentor perspective. I think the gift that I think I now realize that he gave me was simply the knowledge and belief that I would be capable to start something similar to what he did, in the standpoint that I think a lot of us, we believe what we see. So if somebody who's related to you can go off and do something, there's a natural transition there where you're like, oh, well, if he did that and he's my grandfather, well, then certainly I could potentially do something like that too, right? So I think that was probably the greatest gift, was that in the 40s after World War II, he started the family business, servicing heavy equipment, selling and servicing heavy equipment in the Eugene area. So I think that's the gift that ultimately he provided to me and even to my cousins and others in the family who are very entrepreneurial and somewhat successful. Just by seeing that model of success allows you to believe in yourself. So I think that's the greatest gift that he kind of paved the way. I wish he was around today. I'd love to ask him a ton of questions about scaling the business and employees. He was always about his people. So I'd love to ask him questions if he were around today.
Yeah, I could imagine as well. I do love that, Bryan. I think what I'm interested to know is, do you think that at the time when you launched MiiR, when you started the brand, first and foremost, what was the first product that you launched with?
Yeah, we started off with a stainless steel bottle. It was a single wall bottle with a really simple opening. And the idea, it's funny because now there's a ton of bottle companies, right? There's many options. And in 2009, when I started working on the brand, there were very few options, maybe 3 kind of known brands. And all of them kind of existed out of kind of the ether, so to speak, meaning, not to pick on our competitors, but just to share their founding stories. Clean Canteen was simply the first company that had gone to China, grabbed a product off the shelf from one of the factories. So they didn't design it; they just slapped their logo on it. Same thing with Swell. The reason you see so many Swell knockoffs is because they actually didn't design that bottle. It was simply an off-the-shelf product from China. They happened to put the Swell name on it and put some beautiful graphics on it. So a lot of these products were just kind of like not designed; they were just kind of logo slapped. I grew up on Nalgene's backpacking, and Nalgene was a great product. It was plastic, unfortunately, and the way the lid kind of swung off, and when you drank from it, you kind of spilled water on your face. So I kind of had this observation. I think pattern recognition is something that I learned from my family, and has been very beneficial as an entrepreneur, of just recognizing patterns and where there's opportunity. And so I thought, I'm going to build a better water bottle. I think there's an opportunity here to build a simple, functional, elegant water bottle. So that was kind of the idea, is like, I'm going to start off making this beautiful water bottle. And then I want to merge business and philanthropy. We're basically giving somebody a bottle. Let's also invest into clean water, which is a whole other story of how we kind of ended up there, which is super fun. But that's the original product that we came up with.
It's really interesting you mentioned about patterns and pattern recognition, and especially with entrepreneurship. But I was actually listening this morning to a podcast with Jay Shetty talking about how if you're able to acknowledge or even notice the patterns in your day-to-day life and see what patterns lead to success or wins, or even what patterns lead to what make you feel good, to then be able to build upon that. So it's really interesting that, and I'm sure you can spot that with other entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs as well.
Absolutely.
Let's go back. I'm really interested, Bryan, that, okay, so you thought of the product, you thought of how you could redesign or design better the product and communicate that product, but the need for it, I mean, even 10 years ago, I mean, now it seems commonplace, right? But 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been. So tell me how you merged, or how you really thought about giving back, doing good with a product as well.
Yeah. 10, 11 years ago, social enterprise wasn't really a thing. It's great that it's being taught in schools, business schools and universities now. It's fantastic. And, back in the day when I was in school, there was no entrepreneurial classes, certainly no social enterprise classes, that's for sure. I think I've always been curious and kind of challenging the status quo, and really pushing at the boundaries, and knowing that when you kind of push those edges, those moments of learning that happen at the edges, or at least the experience, there's either massive breakthroughs, or you're doing something that's kind of on the front end. And I think in a weird way, that's, fast forward to 2020, I've really enjoyed this year. And it sounds weird to say that, especially, I don't enjoy the disruption, so to speak, for many, many small businesses, and for the health implications of COVID for people. But this has been a tremendous year of living on the edge. And so kind of, it reminds me of starting MiiR all over again, in a sense where, at the beginning in 2009, thinking, hey, I'm going to sell this product, and for every product we sell, we're going to help give people clean water, or access to clean drinking water in developing countries. And I remember people being like, why would you do that? Like, why would you actively give money away when you could keep it? And it was just like, well, I mean, you can, but I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it for the joy of developing a more beautiful product. Sure, I'm going to make money along the way and provide for my family. Those are important things. But when you have a moment or a kiss of death, you start to realize that, things from the external standpoint that you think will make you happy actually don't make you happy. And so, I think I was lucky enough to kind of understand that at a fairly early age. Money can buy nice things and whatnot, but it's not the things, it's the relationships and the people that you help along the way, and ultimately that help you as well, that are really the fruit of life, I think. So yeah, it was, I don't know, it was just kind of a commitment to that idea of generosity from a very early standpoint. And it's interesting because there's kind of this thread, especially for entrepreneurs, of like people helping people, right? Standing on their shoulders. And, when I first started working on MiiR, I knew that I wanted to give. I didn't know how or what we would give to. And I was like, well, we're selling water bottles that hold water, like clean water is interesting. I've kind of heard about this issue of clean water. And then it's kind of fascinating, this story where my wife, Rebecca, when we were in college, before we married, she actually nannied for Jason Kyler, who is the founder and CEO of Hulu for a while. And we were beta testing Hulu. So he left Amazon, he was working on the secret project. And in 2009, he launches Hulu, and we're beta testing it, and we have this login, we're like watching The Office or something. And Jason had given ad space to Scott Harrison at Charity Water. And so an ad came on, this new platform we're testing out, Hulu, and an ad comes on for Charity Water, and Scott Harrison broke it down that close to 1 billion people lacked access to clean water. And it really, whatever moment in time, right place, it just really struck me that 3 times the population of the US, in the world, didn't have something as simple as clean drinking water. And I thought, I can't change the entire problem, but I can certainly contribute to help positively impact people's lives around the world, and hopefully do so in a meaningful way. And so that's how we initially tied, bottles to clean water. We've done some other products since then. And our giving has kind of expanded more into the idea of empowering people for a better future. Meaning we started gleaning insights, and in the outdoor channel, there was more of aspiration to help clean up waterways. People kind of camping and whatnot don't necessarily, some people certainly love the idea of giving to people in developing countries. But in the outdoor sector, it was more of environment, clean water, reducing plastic waste, stuff like that. So we've kind of broadened our giving, so to speak, from just clean drinking water.
I'm glad you explained all of that, because I was wondering if you had if you did have a burning desire to be helping others, and that's very evident from the start when you launched the product and the brand, there's something I want to ask you. When you said you saw that advert for Charity Water and that clicked for you, that was what, 10, 11 years ago. Why do you think we can, and I want to have a conversation about this, why do you think that we're still talking about issues of water inequality, not just around the world, but even within the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think big issues take a really long time to address. I'm actually reading a fairly interesting book right now, and I just as about to say, I was like, I totally just the title just escaped me, but it's The Rational Optimist. I think that's what it's called, The Rational Optimist, and it's fascinating because I think what I've figured out for myself at least is that there's excitement, unfortunately, and there's certainly headlines to be sold around poverty or around extreme issues, and rightfully so, whether it's climate initiatives or whatever the thing is. There's a lot of negativity in our world. Negativity sells, unfortunately, and I think the breakdown is that negativity kind of bears down on us. And then if you step back and you look at the reality of the context of the human history, and the Rational Optimist does a great job of breaking down that there's actually been a lot of advancements in the last 100 years, from people raising up from $1 a day to having access to clean water, to having access to vaccines. And so we're certainly a long way off from solving the clean water crisis, and we should definitely be doing more. I don't know the latest stats. I should jump on Charity Water's website, but I believe it's close to 1 billion people 10, 11 years ago. I want to say it's almost cut in half. It's now 500 or 600 million people globally is what it's estimated to be. And what's interesting is there's a mass migration of people from the countryside into urban areas. And so Splash, who's one of our water partners, who's headquartered in Seattle, they're actually focusing on a lot of making sure that the water inside of urban cities like Kathmandu is clean, because there's a lot of dirty water in big cities. And so, when I'm traveling internationally, oftentimes in big cities, in big urban cities, I'm still filtering water just to be safe because it's not always clean. And so it's a huge issue. It's certainly an issue of the ages. But you look at AIDS, the AIDS pandemic many years ago, it's definitely gotten better. So I think some of these things just take time. There's certainly room for opportunity for us all to certainly do more. And, we wish businesses could be slightly, just a little bit more generous. I think that would go a long way.
Well, I think what is key to what you just said, Bryan, is the fact that negative headlines sell paper or gets you to click on things, right? And that the headline is bigger than the story right now, and more than ever so now. And I think that we mustn't forget there are incredible people doing incredible initiatives behind the scenes, such as yourself with MiiR, the brand, that are really helping to just bring a better life and future for people. Because it is very easy to get caught up in the negative, if that's all you're seeing. And I spoke about this on the last episode. It's kind of like an algorithm, right? If you don't teach the algorithm to show you the good, you're only going to see the negative, and then it's like a wormhole, a rabbit hole you go down.
Yeah. And the algorithm, it's interesting. The digital algorithm of social media, is certainly one to question and to study more and to be cognizant of. It's almost as though the human mental algorithm is those channels of those repetitive thought patterns and thought process of negativity, and there's a feedback loop there. I think the science is fairly clear too that self-talk, a lot of confidence is actually not based upon prior success or overcoming certain obstacles. It's actually what you say to yourself every single moment and every single day. And it's interesting because like this summer, I took a week off after like an excruciating long season of work, and I put away the social media, I put away the phone. And it was one of the best weeks I've had in a really, really long time. And here we are thumbing through social media, thinking we're getting these quick hits of dopamine, of excitement, of, surfing waves and our friends doing epic stuff and the most curated piece. But in fact, it's quite detrimental. And I don't know what to do about it, because there's a lot of eyeballs there, and there's a lot of money to be made and brands to grow and messages certainly to get out there. Right. And so I think one thing I've observed during COVID is, being cognizant of what you can control and what you cannot control. So I am certainly able to control, especially what I put in front of my face, right? From a visual perspective, what headlines I read, and even what headlines I click. Because if you click it, you're rewarding it, right? And if you're serving those ads, or you're buying ads or retargeting ads or whatever it is, there's an effect there. And so being cognizant, I think, is the first piece of kind of self-awareness, of observing what we're kind of feeding our brains, and really starting to think about, let's not feed on pessimism. Let's actually have an appetite of optimism. And it's so hard these days because even, in the US, the political culture, it's so negative. We're chatting internally about, gosh, I'm trying to think of 2004. You look back at some of the debates of presidential candidates who were, adamantly opposed of each other, but there was not this level of discourse and trash talking, back in the day. And so unfortunately, it's come to a new height, which just, I think, bleeds into the culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to say I'm very fortunate to be able to remove myself away from US politics, because I'm not eligible to vote, so I'm not really feel that I need to have an opinion on it. So I sort of feel the pain of people with what everybody's going through right now leading up to November. But just to go back to something that you said as well, I think it is difficult to get the balance. I mean, you said you had that week off and you went away and you put your phone down, social media was gone, and you felt amazing. My wife and I have spent a lot of time in the last 2-3 months trying to be getting outdoors and out in as many microclimates as we can, just to be getting outside of just really to reconnect with ourselves. And what I've noticed is sometimes I'd be fearful of missing out on the creativity that I would find or come across on social media, but then I'd forget and then suddenly realize, well, actually, no, I'm getting creative. I'm feeding on creativity from just nature and being outdoors in different areas and stuff. So it's definitely getting that balance right. I mean, my wife came off all social media platforms 2 months ago, and it's helped her to no end. It's been incredible, and she probably or may not ever go back on again. My job and business is based around brand development and brand communication, so I kind of need to be involved in that as well. So it's definitely finding that balance.
Totally. Yeah, that balance is key for sure.
So where is MiiR, and where are you right now with regards to social impact, social and environmental impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big topic for sure. I think, there's kind of the nuts and bolts of just, we as a brand since inception have been able to grant over $1.5 million to some incredible nonprofit partners around the world. And that number to us is important, not just for the sake of numbers, but I think, when my wife and I started MiiR, it was really this idea. And I think for the first couple of years, it felt a little disingenuous of, hey, we're writing a check for $5,000 here, $10,000 there. And knowing that probably both of us working in corporate America, we would make more money and then therefore be able to give more money away. And so I think what's great now is about, we're on this trajectory, and, COVID slowed us a little bit down, but, really starting to grant and create a model that, if we're no longer around, it'll continue. And to see a number that's much bigger than what we could have individually done, I think is a metric that we certainly celebrate internally between the two of us, if not the broader company. So there's this commitment to generosity that we're certainly a part of. Many countries around the world we've been able to invest in. But I think that's probably what I'm most proud of is the ability that we've created a brand that resonates globally and to build beautiful relationships around the world. I mean, some of our partners, over in Asia and over in Europe are just, they too, one of my good friends talks about your vibe attracts your tribe. And it's so true, because with our brand, we're finding similar brands. We're finding B Corps. We're finding other partners. Patagonia, we started doing their drinkware about 5 years ago, and we're now their exclusive global provider of drinkware. And it's just it's a multiplier effect, right? And so I think that's something that's been really great for us from a social environmental perspective. Patagonia has certainly led the charge on organic cottons, kind of regenerative agriculture and the provisions line for them. And so it's challenged us to think about what does that look like for our product line. Obviously it's a durable water bottle. We're not using single-use plastic waste. But is there a way to inject, even more sustainability into some of our products? So we're really exploring kind of new product innovation around plastics, around sustainability, around sourcing, even simple things like, moving from a plastic poly bag that protects the product from, the supplier to the shelf. Can that be compostable? Can we move to a compostable bag? Yes, we can. Is it more expensive? Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but that's something that matters to us. And we were just on a podcast with my buddy Mark, who owns 10 to 1 Rum, and we were talking about how once you know your purpose and you establish your values, it actually makes a lot of decisions quite easy because you know where it's a filter in which you see things. And so for us to make that transition was obviously fairly easy. Our flagship store in Seattle is an LEED Platinum certified building. So a lot of these choices from a sustainability and environmental perspective are fairly simple. Where they get complicated are, when you get into food testing and because all of our products have to be food grade because it's consumed through beverages. You want to get into like as an example, there's a great organization called Oreo, and they take fish nets that are on beaches or back from fishermen and women who no longer have the need for the nets, and they basically melt it down into new nylon pellets. But that new nylon is actually not food grade, so we can't use that. So I don't know, those are the challenges that are actually kind of fun to solve, but those are the kind of things you run up against once you start to kind of dive into that deep hole of sustainability.
Well, that's really interesting, Bryan. Are you saying essentially that, do you think or believe that the not necessarily the rules, but the guidelines, do you think that the guidelines need to be changed by whoever is determining food grade with regards to if you're able to make amazing developments with the products that you're producing because you have that foresight and that vision of a better life, of a better future for the planet? Do you think that needs to change to catch up with where you are?
I think yes and no. I think some of that product testing, I mean, ironically, people might find this fascinating, but we sell in, I'm trying to think, 20 something countries now. And certification for food grade products in China is remarkably and astoundingly more complicated and more difficult than in the US, which is kind of scary, if you think about it. And from the standpoint of it's actually quite hard to get a product approved in China in the drinkware space as opposed to the US. There's very little regulation in the US. So in one sense, I'm usually a fan of less regulation, but I think when you have a product that's, been around fish and fisheries, it's sometimes you're like, this is ridiculous because you melt the nylon at such a high temperature that there's absolutely no way that any bacteria would ever be into this plastic that we could then use for another product. You're also like, okay, I get it, but it does need to catch up. But it simply kind of redirects our course. So then we look at other materials and we go, okay, well, HDPE, milk cartons, highly recyclable. HDPE is one of the best recyclable materials. I think it's either 1 or 2 on the recycle pyramid. And listen, most recycling is kind of a sham, but LDPE and HDPE are highly, highly recyclable products. And so, it simply informed us to go, okay, well, what does post-consumer recycled HDPE look like? And could we use that? And so we found some success there and actually just got approval for some plastic products for next year through FDA testing, which is fantastic. So some of it's good, some of it's bad. We're working on some European business, and we've requested a very simple form from the IRS that allows us to do a kind of a VAT transaction in Europe without having to use an agent and things like that. It's taken 7 months. We've requested it 3 times, and we just got a notice of denial because we didn't fill out the application entirely. But yet it's only a 10 questionnaire, and we filled out all 10 questions incompleteness. So there's things like that where you're just like, oh, come on.
Right. I guess that goes back to you being an entrepreneur and fighting against all of these things that come back to you. I mean, do you think, Bryan, listening to what you were just saying about milk cartons, recycling that and using that within your product line, do you think you're at the forefront with regards to research on how things can be redeveloped, reused for your products or anything else?
I mean, I think so. I mean, there's definitely some interesting products out there, and there's Cradle to Cradle is a great book, and there's a lot of I mean, you tug on one little thing in sustainability, and the thread runs very deep, and is potentially challenging. And I think for us, one of the benefits of being privately held and owning the majority of my company is that we can make decisions on our own pace, so to speak. Meaning, a lot of competitors out there are publicly traded, and they have quarterly earnings, and while they, have these goals of being sustainable or better for the environment or whatever, what have you, they're also being held accountable financially to a public market. And I think there's some advantages that we have, and we can move quicker. And I certainly think, as we've brought in more talent from corporate America, so to speak, it's interesting to see how quickly we can actually move compared to some of the larger companies. So I think some of our innovation is actually probably at the forefront. There's a lot of great companies doing a lot of great things around plastics, but even around plastics, you get into bioplastic would be good. Let's put some wheat husk or some coffee husk into this plastic to cut down the amount of plastic. But then you realize that if you do that, then it's not a pure virgin plastic and it can't be recycled. So it's incinerated or it's thrown away, so there's this really deep rabbit hole that you go through when you try to innovate around materials. But it's super fun. We've been playing around with super lightweight stainless steel in specific extruding methods, and that's actually lighter than titanium. It's less expensive. There's which means if it's lighter, then there's less CO2 emissions from the freight. So there's a lot of really cool things. I think a great example, is Apple. Apple's done a fairly great job of reducing harmful chemicals in their products. They, for the most part, you can return your laptop or your phone and get a bit of credit, and they're downcycling those and either using the batteries downstream or a new market for that. So I think I think those big companies who are good models are inspiring for us. Speaking to MiiR, we launched a product line called Reclaimed earlier this year at Outdoor Retailer, and we're still, some of the first products are actually coming out this fall. But the idea was, we kept getting we always get returns. Our return rate is fairly low because there's no sizes, so to speak, meaning like you don't have to try it on. And inevitably stuff gets damaged, it gets returned, right? And so we just had this section of our warehouse where Amazon returns, our own website returns were coming back in, and the typical model is just like throw it away, right? Or just salvage it or whatever else. We're like, no, I think we actually make something from this product. And so we were inspired by many of the apparel companies, Arc'teryx, Patagonia, who kind of have this worn wear program or recrafted program where they're taking used and making it new again. And so we have we've basically been able to take some of our camp cups that have gotten returned and turn them into these amazing candles that smell absolutely divine. And so, people will be like, why are you selling candles? You're a drinkware company, right? And so, I don't know. So those are fun things that we get to be a part of and kind of push the envelope on innovation. And so I certainly like to think we're ahead of our competition, but the fear of our competition catching up with us definitely motivates us to move fast.
Yeah, well, I think as well, Bryan, I can see the passion and interest and how inspired you are by making a difference. I don't think that you would be resting on your laurels too long with regards to product development and moving things forward. But tell me a little bit about being a B Corp as a business and what 1% for the planet means as well for you guys.
Yeah. The B Corp journey has been fun and a total headache. I'll be completely transparent. It's not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's interesting. B Corp approached us in 2013, I want to say, and they were like, "You're the perfect company to do this. Like you're transparent, blah blah blah." And I was actually fairly apprehensive. I was like, "I don't have time for this. We're already transparent. We have a code on the bottom of every single one of our products. So if you register the product, you actually see how much money we grant, where we grant to, what the success rate is, if it's failed. Like we're very transparent about our giving because it's not a marketing gimmick. For us, it's a part of who we are from day one. And so we're going to tell you everything that happens with the give from our aspect. So to me, it was like, well, we're already transparent. So I don't know if I need a certification. And I was, looking at food, where you see all those certifications, you're like, is it real? Is it not real? And they kept kind of wearing me down. I finally finished the application in 2013. We became a B Corp, I want to say 2014, I think is when we became a B Corp. And ironically, Patagonia actually emailed us that same time frame and said, "Hey, we love your designs. We think we'd like to work with you," which was incredible because, growing up as a fanboy of Patagonia, I was certainly like kind of having one of those moments of, is this real? And so we ended up, when we flew down to Patagonia to meet with the team, I got to meet Yvonne and hear a bit about, obviously his passion for environmentalism. They're like, hey, we really prefer that people are B Corps that were partnered with us. And I was like, guess what? We just got approved like last week, and so that, from a timing perspective, it worked out. But it's a really great platform. It's a lot of hard questions, about your supply chain, about how your company is structured, how you treat your employees, to your community, to who you serve, to who you sell to. It's very, very, very complex, but it's good because what it does is it establishes kind of this bar of what you have to score to even be a B Corp. And then outside of that, then every 2 or 3 years, you reassess, and the bar kind of goes up a little bit every year, just up a little bit more, up a little bit more. So the idea is that we're all getting better. We're all trying to improve the way that business is operated at. Is there a way to improve your supply chain? Can you get more efficient? Can you stop shipping things, from Asia to the US and then back to Japan? Or, there's a lot of different things that you can start to study within your business to become better. And it's intrinsically motivated. You're competing on a platform for good, so to speak. So that's B Corp, 1% for the planet. Again, kind of reluctantly I was like, well, listen, we're giving 3%. So 1% actually kind of makes it seem like we're giving less, right? And so we had a chat with 1% for the planet, and they were like, yeah, nothing's preventing you from, saying kind of you're doing 3%. Just, all you have to do is designate 1% of that 3% to some of the approved nonprofits. And it turned out that 2 of our nonprofit partners, our great partners, Splash and Water First, were already part of 1% for the planet. So that ended up working out fairly nicely for us. And it's a great kind of cohort, so to speak, of businesses that are all aligned. We just joined Climate Neutral. We're a founding member of Climate Neutral, which essentially commits to measuring, offsetting, and reducing your carbon emissions. And they do a really incredible job of providing us a platform that's comprehensive, but not overwhelming of sometimes it's hard to track your emissions as a brand, especially as a startup, right? Like our first office, we were like a sublease of a sublease of a sublease. And it's like, we have no idea how much energy we're consuming as a brand within this sublease, and so trying not to get too bogged down in that, but, really kind of setting that general heading for sustainability and then making improvements along the way.
Well, I love everything that you said, Bryan. And my question is, why do you think, or why don't you think more brands are doing this? The kind of the model that you have built up so well.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of thoughts. Probably, it's not easy. I think there's something about entrepreneurialism, especially in the way it's celebrated these days. Being an entrepreneur, 10, 11 years ago wasn't necessarily a celebrated, kind of moniker. It was kind of just something you did out of your passion. And, the crazy people went and started businesses, right? And now it's kind of like, you see it on Instagram, everybody's an entrepreneur. And I think, at least for me, it's not easy, but I think, we were talking about this at our team, at one of our team meetings, and I don't know if everybody actually knows their purpose, whether it's a business or an individual. I think having a personal philosophy or a brand, a really, really resonant brand purpose is not easy. It's difficult. And if you don't have that place to operate from, it's really hard to make decisions that impact your financial bottom line. But here's the great irony is that I think it's actually better for our business, I think, is better because we're a better business, if that makes sense. And so I think people's fear of oh no, if I give more money away or I make a commitment to sustainability, people are going to hold me accountable. And if I mess up, they're going to cancel me. Yeah, some people might. But I actually think you're gonna resonate with more of your people if you're making commitments to doing good. And doing good looks a lot of different ways, right? I'm friends with through another cohort of businesses. I believe they are a mining company. I can't remember whether it's sand or gravel or something like that. And they really want to improve their mission. And so before they would just go and get permits to be able to extract whether they're extracting, and didn't consider the community. They got permitted by the city or the county or whatever, they would do it. And then now they actually go in, they do research, they talk to community members. And if the community doesn't want them there, they actually don't go into there. And so, that's like a very micro example of how to do business better, so to speak. But I don't know, it's certainly fascinating as to why, I don't know if this is correlated, but since it's an election year, you think that there's this mass engagement. But if you look in 2016 and even some of the other elections, the largest party is the apathy party. There were more people who didn't vote in the US in 2016, the presidential election, for a party, meaning like, yeah, if you combine everybody who voted, it's more than people that didn't vote. But as an example, it's like 60 million people voted for Donald Trump, 61 million voted for Hillary Clinton, 100 million people didn't cast a vote. 100 million people. So maybe similarly with business is that it's just kind of like, it's just easier to not do anything. And so how do we inspire people and motivate people to do better, I think is really the age, the question of the century, or the age-old question, I think.
But do you not think, Bryan, that the customer or the end citizen is going to request that? They're going to want that. They need that from a brand, from that product they buy.
I think, I want to believe it. And I do think it exists. I do think that consumers, rightfully or not, are creatures of convenience. And I don't think it's always convenient to do the right thing in the short term. And I think that is part of the, potentially one of the, challenges. And meaning by that, I mean, a lot of us still drive cars, and go to the gas station and fill up with gas, right? And then there's this massive movement of, everybody has to have an EV or, electric vehicle. And yeah, that's a great progress, but like nobody's really asking the question of, well, what is the CO2 footprint of extracting minerals around the world and potentially slave labor involved in getting those minerals? And maybe, this is why Yvon Chouinard drives a really old Subaru. He's like, what's better than an EV? Me continuing to drive the same damn old car that I've had for a really long time, So I think that's all, we're attracted to shiny things, as consumers, as people. I'm certainly guilty of that. So I don't know.
Do you not think that's trend though? What you just said, for example, electronic vehicles, do you not think that's trend that's being pushed at people? I mean, what I'm saying, the question I asked to you was, you're in that place, you're leading the way of what other brands and products should be doing. What I'm sort of trying to understand myself is, do you think that customers, citizens now, Generation Zs, millennials, they're going to be wanting and looking for that from brands and companies? Maybe I'm just being romantic. I'm not sure.
No, I think it's a good question. I think the data says, this is what's interesting, is the data says that they do care, right? But it's almost like when somebody asks you, hey, would you rather buy something that's good for the environment or just is neutral? Most people are going to say they want something that's good, right? However, if they walk down the street and they walk to a convenience store and they're hungry, they're going to buy what's on the shelf. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing where I think people genuinely want to do the right thing or the good thing. There's just not always the right, all the potential options. And that's what I think is great about the last 10 years of entrepreneurship and starting a business, is that now more than ever, it's easier to start something. And I think the more disruption and the more people competing for that customer, I think ultimately can help businesses become better. Because if if these 100-year-old companies know that an upstart overnight can become a B Corp 1% for the planet member, source from their same factories and do it in a better way, they can out-hustle or out-compete them. I think that's really good for the world. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm an optimist. I want people to actually put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, it's funny what you say about people will say yes, they want to do better for the planet, and then they'll just buy whatever's convenient for them. I've been having a lot of conversations recently. There's a project that I'm working on called Compost is Cool. Essentially, it started out as a platform to educate people on home composting your food scraps, turning it circular to go back into the land, the soil, for regenerative farming or, organic fertilizer for the land. And we're going to be beta testing in apartment blocks. And romantically, I thought in my mind, well, yeah, everybody in that apartment building is going to want to compost their food waste and see good go back into the circular. And so we said, well, before we beta test, why don't we go and survey these people? And so that one of the people on the call said, well, we could do that. And most likely what you'll find is everyone's going to tick the box and say, yes, of course, I'm going to compost my food waste. You give me a bin to keep it in my kitchen and you come and collect it and it's going to do great. Amazing. I'm all in. But when it comes down to it, like you said, it's all a matter of convenience. So we'll see.
Yeah, to be determined. It's a conundrum, you know. I think the unlock is for people hopefully to do the work that they understand where they sit in the spectrum of purpose, and then start to operate out of that. I mean, even as myself, you know, it's like, you know, we sell on Amazon. Is Amazon good? Is it bad? You know, I think, you know, that's a litigation for another day. But it's interesting. Even on that side, I'm like, oh, I need a good pair of pants, right? Amazon has the new brand Good Threads. I bought those pants, and you know, they're okay. They may not be the most high quality, and you know, unfortunately, one of them started falling apart. And you know, it really struck me, and I was like, you know, I have enough money that actually I could buy something like Taylor Stitch, that's, you know, maybe double or triple the price, but it's going to last a heck of a lot longer because it's made from thicker material. It's maybe higher quality, and I think we've gotten used to, whether it's fast fashion or just consuming and throwing away. You know, we've lost this practice of fixing and just kind of wearing things out for the long term. I mean, another example is we had, you know, when my wife and I got married, we bought a 42-inch plasma screen TV, and you know, we had this TV for 12 years, and it finally fizzled out, and everybody's like, oh, just buy a new TV. They're super inexpensive. And then I was like, well, I'm going to get it fixed, you know, and first of all, trying to find someone to fix the TV was like almost impossible. But we did, and it was like $110 to fix the TV, you know, versus buying a new one. And I mean, that's a micro example. You know, I just recently moved, and I bought another TV that's brand new. So it's, you know, I think just trying to move it forward on the spectrum of doing good is only what we can do. You know, and encouraging others, and certainly not shaming. You know, one thing that we do is, you know, when nobody wants to be told what not to do, we want to come up at a place of inspiring people to do good, and to choose to be generous.
Well, I think what I really like, something you just said, Bryan, is the fact that if we're able to really look inside, go internally, do the right things for ourselves to feel good, to raise our energies, that will then reverberate, be a repercussion through your family or through your friends or through the people you meet. That's kind of the other way of going in the right direction as well, you know. And I
really
believe that
circle of influence. You know, I think we forget how much influence we have on those people around us, and you know, I think social media has unfortunately put us in a place where we hope for others to change our situation versus us changing our situation for ourselves. And what I mean by that is, you know, take an example of, like, I don't drink bottled water. I probably haven't had a bottle of water. I'll take that back. When I get to Africa, oftentimes it's hard to not have bottled water when you're in remote places and there's not clean water. But for the most part, I don't drink bottled water. And even as we go over to China, we do UV treatments and whatnot from the hotels. But you know, even that thing of just, I don't shame my friends when we all go on a trip and they want to get bottled water, but I am very clear. I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to bring some bottles. Let's try not to have bottled water. And then even within our own company, you know, years and years ago when we used to travel overseas to Asia to do some sourcing, we would all drink bottled water in the hotel room because it was convenient, it was easy. And then, you know, eventually somebody stepped up on our team and said, hey, I really think that we should all get SteriPens. And anytime anybody goes to Asia, it's a competition to see who uses the least amount of water bottles. Because inevitably you're on a 5-hour car ride somewhere and you're thirsty and there's nothing around. And you need some water, right? So there's a practicality piece of it. But you know, now all of our team that is around, you know, when we go places, we don't use bottled water. I mean, that's a really simple example, but I think those are the things that actually move the needle.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking as you were saying that, Bryan, when my wife and I go out for a day trip somewhere, we've literally got a bag full of about 10 water bottles, and it takes about 5 minutes to fill all of them up to take for the day. And then if we ever get through them all, we're like, well, what are we going to do? I don't want to go to a store to buy it. You know, so we're hunting around for a water fountain to refill.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, Bryan, I'm interested to know, is there somebody, or is there a brand or product or company out there that you feel passionate about, that inspires you, that you think is leading the way?
Oh yeah. So I mean, so many brands out there that are really, I think, doing a great job and kind of moving the needle on sustainability. I mean, I think for sure Patagonia has done an incredible job of kind of paving the way. And I truly believe one of the reasons they've been able to be so successful is that they're not owned by private equity or venture capital or even the public markets. I think the public markets are starting to change for sure. Um, but I think Patagonia's absolute relentless commitment to environmental sustainability is certainly admirable. Some smaller brands. I think Taylor Stitch, from a men's clothing perspective, is doing a really really great job. The Renewal Workshop out of Portland, they're kind of more of a brand platform, but they're taking returns from other organizations, jackets or whatever that have been gently worn or whatever, and then turning them into products that can be consumed again. That feels like a really good movement that you're seeing it now in the apparel space. Like I think Arc'teryx is part of it, Marmot's part of it, Patagonia is certainly part of it. So I think those, especially in the outdoor space, are doing some really really incredible work there. And then, gosh, there's I'm totally blanking on the company, but it hit a headline about somebody who used to be early on at Tesla left to start their own battery company, and they're taking lithium-ion batteries and basically recycling them into to new batteries. And I think that's such a need in the EV space, as opposed to new. How do we reuse these batteries? So I think that's amazing. Rayo, I mentioned earlier, they're in Ventura. They're taking recycled fish nets and making new plastic out of it. So things like that are just really, really inspiring. And I think this is what you were getting at earlier. I think you're seeing other brands like Nike having to respond to that, and they have bins at their stores to put your old shoes in, and they're making tracks out of the new shoes. And, so I think those sort of things are really, really cool, and the right thing to do. So it's a big world out there, and there's a lot of great brands doing it. And I think that's where the certification certainly comes in, that, if B Corp can maintain that level, and 1% can help with that, I think that helps clarify for sure.
I love it. I love it, Bryan. You're an inspiration. I love everything that you've built and what you do. I think it's incredible. MiiR, the brand, and the product as well. It's an incredible product. I wish you all the best with all of your new endeavors. And obviously, I'd love to carry this conversation on with you again sometime. I know you're a busy guy, so I want to thank you again for that. But I would love to talk to you further about everything.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure chatting with you today, Luke. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, people can check us out at MiiR.com, MIIR.com. And yeah, you can join the movement. You can kind of jump in and be a part of what we're up to. But yeah, thanks for having the conversation. It was quite fun.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bryan. Take care.
All right. Cheers.